Okay. Looks like we're recording. Hope you've been having a good or a happy Alien Day. That's right, because I don't celebrate 4th of July's. So I celebrate Alien Day. That's right. Now, before I get started, I guess this is gonna be a long one. So this video might be in parts, maybe 3 parts. Maybe not, I'm not sure. Also, I gotta worry about goddamn buffering. This piece of shit computer I'm using has to go. And unfortunately, I'm not going to switch off computers just yet because there's so much shit on this motherfucker. I'm already noticing some lagging. So please, if there's any buffering or lagging, please have patience. Second thing, because of the length of this video, you might want to watch it at a higher speed. I'm looking over there because I want to make sure it doesn't buffer throughout the whole damn thing. And if it does begin to buffer, I'm going to have to cut it up while I'm recording. In other words, I'll have to pause, you know. First beer of the day. I will now read from the Hollywood Gospel of Charles Manson. You're not going to find this in any bookstore. This is from research that I have done. Because everybody always talks about the Manson, and the movie's coming out this month, the Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So this is like a companion piece. You know what I'm saying? So I hope you enjoy this. Watch it, listen to it, whatever, before you go see the movie. So that way you have some idea. Because when they bring up the Charles Manson family, it's always what they did. Who got killed? But they don't ever tell you what these people believed. That's what I find interesting. So here we go. I'm gonna have to Charles Manson believed that the blacks, or very dark brown Africans, were the sons of Ham, one of Noah's sons, whom Noah cursed to be the ancestor of slaves. Genesis 9:18 through 29. Manson was even arrogant enough to call the children of part dark brown African or Negro and Caucasoid ancestry a black and white minstrel show. And nowhere in Genesis 9:18 through 29 is skin color mentioned. And in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 8:26 through 39, it said that St. Philip, the evangelist, converted to Christianity the treasurer of the queen of the Ethiopians, Candace. Manson sometimes believed that he was another John the Baptist type, prophet, sent to prepare the way for the, and please excuse me, I'm going to try to pronounce this, parousia, or second coming of Jesus Christ. And Manson was angry with those Jews who refused to convert to Christianity. Charles Manson was also a statuary polygamist, concubinist, rapist. A statuary polygamist, concubinist, rapist is someone who marries or has a concubine or de facto wife more than one female under the age of 16 at the same time. The family that Charles Manson gave the name to the members of his cult. I have the fan on, it's fucking hot as hell. Might have been an allusion to Manson's part to Ephesians 3:14 through 15, where the apostle St. Paul says, "For this reason I bow my knees to the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, from whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named." I'm going to lower this fan down a little because it might be causing some feedback. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Charles Manson, who sometimes believed that he was a prophet for the Son of Man, the second coming of Jesus Christ, opening the seven seals mentioned in the New Testament book of Revelation. In other words, the parousia was also a strong admirer of Adolf Hitler, and one of the possible reasons why Charles Manson carved the swastika in his forehead. I want to emphasize the fact, though, that when he first carved it on his forehead, him and his members, it was an X. It was a different meaning. Later, for some reason, he added the other parts to it to make it a swastika. I think the X represented the unknown. Also, in Roman numerals, it represents 10. Okay, let's go. Charles Manson carved Charles Manson carved the swastika in his forehead was because he was angry with those Jews who refused to believe that he was a prophet for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Sharon Tate's husband, Roman Polanski, is a Polish Jew who survived the Nazi Holocaust when he was a boy. Charles Manson, while in prison from 1960 through 1967, became a follower of the Scientology splinter sect called the Process Church of the Final Judgment, a sect that worshipped Adolf Hitler and believed that its members were part of a saved group bound for heaven. Let's see if it's lagging. Looks okay. And whose duty it was to hasten Armageddon. The logo of the Process Church of the Final Judgment is a swastika. It's a kind of swastika. If you actually look at the symbol, it's like a reimagined version. Jesus Christ told his disciples in Matthew 10:1 through 15, to first preach the gospel of Christianity to the Jews of Israel. And later, Jesus told his disciples to preach the Christian gospel to all the nations of the world in Matthew 28:18 through 20. However, Jesus Christ would not have sanctioned the use of force and violence in converting people to Christianity, as he had taught his disciples in Matthew 7:12 and Luke 6:31, to do towards others as we would want them to do to us. Charles Manson was born in 1934 in the city of Cincinnati, separated by the Ohio River from the former U.S. slave state of Kentucky. And during the U.S. Civil War of 1861 through 1865, many Kentuckians fought for the pro-slavery Southern Confederate States of America, as well as for the pro-federal and pro-high industrial protectionist tariffs of the northern United States of America. Even in the southern counties of Ohio, where Cincinnati is located, there were many pro-Southern sympathizers. Just south of the city of Cincinnati lies the Kentucky town of Covington, located where the Licking River empties into the Ohio River. Manson's alleged biological father was a certain Colonel Scott of Ashland City, located in Kentucky. As a boy, Manson was raised by his mother's sister, or his maternal aunt, who was a Bible-thumping Christian and who lived in the village of McMitchen, located in the former U.S. slave state of West Virginia. where the state's population saw its members divided in their loyalties during the U.S. Civil War of 1861 through 1865. Later, when he was a leader of a pseudo-hippie commune, one of the few books that were allowed to his so-called family were the Bible and the book called Siddhartha. Siddhartha was the original name of Buddha. However, although his aunt or mother's sister often preached the Bible to him, Manson did not learn how to read until he was an adolescent. Once he did learn how to read, Manson would often quote the Bible. Charles Manson was a Nazi who decided to use the hippies because they were so easy to mislead. Being, for the most part, usually unwise and easily bought with drugs and sexual favors, the real reason why Charles Manson was angry with the police was because they refused to make him the chief of the Gestapo, with the power to send to the gas chambers those Jews who refused to believe that he was a prophet for the second coming of Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, the parousia. Jesus Christ said in Matthew 23:37 through 39, the following: "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who aren't sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." For Charles Manson, the true pigs were anyone who opposed his views, especially the politically correct. Let me repeat that part. For Charles Manson, the true pigs were anyone who opposed his views, especially the politically correct. Although to some extent Manson was justified in his hostility towards the politically correct. I agree with that. Charles Manson was also a believer in reincarnation, a part of Scientologist as well as Buddhist and Hindu belief. According to Matthew 11:7 through 15, Matthew 17:1 through 13, and Luke 1:11 through 19, St. John the Baptist was the prophet Elijah returned to earth to prepare people for the first coming of the Old Testament prophesied Messiah. Elijah appeared to be taken up to heaven alive. Manson might have believed on occasions that he was another John the Baptist, sent to prepare the way for the second coming of Jesus Christ. John the Baptist said in Matthew 3:7, to the ancient Israeli Jewish sects called the Pharisees and Sadducees, this brood of vipers who told you to flee from the wrath to come. Manson also on occasions may have believed that he was either Nathan Bedford Forrest, the Southern U.S. Confederate Cavalry General of the U.S. Civil War, 1861 through 1865, who was also a war criminal and a founder of the original 1866 Ku Klux Klan, or John Wilkes Booth, the Shakespearean actor, and let me also add Freemason, who assassinated Abraham Lincoln, reincarnated. Basically, it's possible that Manson thought he was the reincarnation of John Wilkes Booth. The major enemies for the Ku Klux Klan are Afro-Americans, Jews, members of the Roman Catholic denomination of Christianity, the Freemasons, liberal Democrats, let me say that again, liberal Democrats, as opposed to Southern U.S. conservative Democrats, and the communists. My personal theory on the issue of reincarnation and regression to past lives under hypnosis is that possibly memories of one soul that has departed from a dead body are transferred to another soul in a living body and not necessarily that of near or distant relatives. Although all people are distant relatives of each other by means of evolution over many generations. Of course, if this theory is true, there are many people today who are first-timers with no previous memories from a soul that has left a living body transferred to them. And let me take a swig of my brewski. Oh, I see some lag, people. All right. So far, so good, though. The reason why the mainstream Mormon Church, officially known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, abolished polygamy in 1890 was because that was one of the requirements that had to be met in order to allow Utah to gain the status of a state. Even though freedom of religious expression is protected by the U.S. Constitution, Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church, based his favorable views on polygamy on the fact that many famous Jews mentioned in the Old Testament practiced polygamy, and concubinage. So it's one of those examples of do as I say, don't do what I do. See what I'm saying? See 1 Kings 11, 1 through 13, Galatians chapter 4. Joseph Smith also claimed that Jesus Christ had 3 wives at the same time, and that they were Mary of Bethany, Martha, and Mary Magdalene, also known as Mary of Magdala. Susan Atkins, one of Charles Manson's concubines, sometimes might have thought that she was Mary Magdalene, a former prostitute according to possibly several Christian denominations, including the Roman Catholic one, who was forgiven by Jesus Christ after she decided to change her ways. Joseph Smith believed that only members of the Mormon Church were true Jews, and that the non-Mormon Jews, the non-Mormon Christians, and the Muslims, pagans or polytheists, agnostics, and atheists were all Gentiles. There have been several Christian groups and cults throughout history who have claimed that sexual intercourse is some kind of mystical, religious, and emotionally as well as physically ecstatic experience. They have included the Puritan sects and cults called the Ranchers and Antinomians. Antinomos, Greek for anti-law. The 1600s English Puritan Rancher sect and cult leaders, Lawrence Clarkson or Lawrence Claxton, and it's another weird name, and Abiezer Cope, might have sometimes thought that they were the 2 witnesses of God mentioned in Revelation chapter 11. And the leader of the 1600s English Puritan sect, called the Antinomians, was a certain Anne Marbury Hutchinson, 1591 through 1643, who settled with her family in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1634. The Puritan Rancher sect believed that as members of the predestined or elect saints, they could do no wrong, and were therefore exempt from all conventional theological interpretations of ethics as taught in both the Old and the New Testaments. In 1643, Anne and several other members of the Hutchinson family were murdered in the then Dutch colony of the state of New York by Native American Indians. I personally do not believe that the Apostle St. Paul's teaching in Romans 10:13 that whomsoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved is a justification to shout the word God when having a sexual orgasm, and then claim that it is an action done in the faith. I also do not believe that the Apostle St. Paul's teaching in Romans 4:15 that where there is no law, there is no sin, is a justification to walk around nakedly because Adam and Eve once did so unashamedly before Satan, the fallen angel, disguised as a snake, Revelation 12:7-9, tricked them into eating the fruit of forbidden knowledge, thereby causing Adam and Eve to lose their innocence and immortality. See also Romans chapter 7 and Song of Songs. I also do not believe that because God the Father is physically speaking neither a man nor a woman, it is morally justifiable to engage in bisexual, homosexual, and lesbian sexual intercourse. The evolutionary purpose of sexual intercourse for humans is to produce offspring. However, in literal fundamentalist interpretation of the Bible can sometimes lead to sin, as those Christians who engage in incest might argue that the children of Adam and Eve and the grandchildren of Noah had to have had sexual intercourse, I'll cover my face, with each other in order to have offspring. Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the Gestapo, who looks somewhat like Emperor Hirohito, a partial puppet of Shogun Hideki Tojo, once ridiculously tried to prove that the Japanese are undercover Aryans. Since the Japanese racially mixed with the indigenous peoples of the Japanese Homei Islands, the Innu, who once had some Caucasian-like physical features, and that the Japanese were really Germans who had split off from the Germans of the European part of the Eurasian continent many thousands of years ago, and in the process genetically and linguistically mutating in their new Asian environment. Today, there are few or no Innu without some Japanese ancestry. Maybe the Innu, where we go, maybe the Innu are the distant cousins of the Eastern Finns or the Guanches of the Canary Islands, who before the Spanish conquest had blonde hair and were tall and average height, but who, like the Berbers and the Basques, had dark olive brown skin and who spoke a non-Indo-European language. To be sarcastic, the Japanese themselves are a mixture of Altaic people, speakers of the closely related Korean, Manchurian, Tungus, Inner Mongolian, Chinese province, and Outer Mongolian, occupied by the Russian military. Occupied by the Russian military from 1916 through 1991. Languages and the Malay people, including the Indonesians and Filipinos, the Southern Chinese, Taiwanese Chinese, and Vietnamese, Laotian, Cambodian, and Thai languages show a heavy Malay substratum, a result of racial mixing between indigenous or earlier arrived people and foreign invaders. Premier Hideki Tojo of Japan can be considered not only as a 20th century Japanese shogun, but also as the 20th century Temujin or Genghis Khan of Asia. Since albinos are the only true whites, ultra-nationalist Japanese political and religious groups, especially those that try to combine Buddhist and Shintoist teachings with Christianity, should try to hire genetic engineers to invent albino-skinned Inus who are immune to sunburn. Inus who are immune to sunburn because of the transfiguration of Jesus Christ when his clothes became as white as light, Matthew 7-2, and with slanted eye folds retained. because of the miracle of the eye of the needle mentioned in Mark 10:25 through 27. See also Proverbs 19:10 and Proverbs 30:8 through 9 in the Old Testament. I am being sarcastic here. Shoko Ashara. And the Aum Shinrikyo or Aum Supreme Truth sect comes to mind. Maybe the martial art of judo should also be genetically encoded into the Japanese by means of genetic engineering. Because of David and Goliath, to be sarcastic again. The Innu have abundant facial hair, as does also Charles Manson, to be sarcastic yet again. Charles Manson believed himself, to be skilled at karate. Time for another swig. There's a lot of it. Like a wise man once said, we got a lot of it. Since 1911, the martial art of judo, which traces, and this is interesting before I continue, this might be the reason why. All of this sounds like, it's separate shit, but it's all connected. And maybe this is the reason why Tarantino included Bruce Lee in the upcoming movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Since 1911, the martial art of judo, which traces its ancestry to the samurai martial art of jujitsu, has been a compulsory subject in Japanese schools for students above the age of 8 years. Although it was banned as a compulsory subject in Japanese schools from 1945 through 1951, after which it was again reintroduced as a compulsory school subject from the age of 8 years and upwards. After 1945, the requirement of all able-bodied Japanese males over the age of 21 to do 3 years of compulsory military service was abolished, although the martial arts still figure prominently in the training of the members of Japan's voluntary self-defense forces and police force to this day. The 3 techniques of judo are, and please forgive me if I mispronounce it, nagiwaza, throwing, katamewaza, wrestling, and atamiwaza, punching and kicking. Atamiwaza may only be taught to judokas above the rank of white belt, and may only be used by them in training and self-defense, but never in judo sporting contests. Katamewaza may only be used in judo sporting contests by judokas, who are at least above the age of 13. During the Second World War, when low on bullets and food, the Japanese soldiers would often launch a banzai bayonet charge and judo atamiwaza attack, preferring a heroic death to humiliating surrender. My God, my beer got warm. Manson had been predicting racial war for some time before he used the term helter-skelter. His first use of the term was at a gathering of the family on New Year's Eve, 1968. This took place at the family's base at Myers Ranch, near California's Death Valley. In its final form, which was reached by mid-February 1969, the scenario had Manson as not only the war's ultimate beneficiary, but its musical cause. He and the family would create an album with songs whose messages concerning the war would be as subtle as those he had heard in songs of the Beatles. More than merely foretell the conflict, this would trigger it, for instructing the young love, America's white youth, to join the family. It would draw the young, white female hippies out of San Francisco's hate, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say Haight-Ashbury. Black men, thus deprived of the white women whom the political changes of the 1960s had made sexually available to them, would be without an outlet for their frustrations, and would lash out in violent crimes against whites. A resultant murderous rampage against blacks by frightened whites would then be exploited by militant blacks to provoke an internecine war of near extermination between racist and non-racist whites over blacks' treatment. Kind of sound what's going on now, huh? Then the militant blacks would arise to sneakily finish off the few whites they would know to have survived. Indeed, they would kill off all non-blacks. Let me repeat that part. Indeed, they would kill off all non-blacks. In this Holocaust, the members of the enlarged family would have little to fear. They would wait out the war in a secret city that was underneath Death Valley that they would reach through a hole in the ground. As the only actual remaining whites upon the race war's true conclusion, they would emerge from the underground to rule the now satisfied blacks who, as the vision went, would be incapable of running the world. Manson would scratch the black man's fuzzy head and kick him in the butt and tell him to go pick the cotton and go be a good, I'm not going to say the word, but you know what it is. Starts with an N, ends with an R. The term helter-skelter was from the so-named Beatles song, which involved apparent reference to the British amusement park ride of that name, and was interpreted by Manson as concerned with the war. The song was on the so-called White Album, formal name, The Beatles. First heard by Manson within a month or so of its November 1968 release. When the Beatles' White Album came out, Charlie listened to it over and over and over and over again. He was quite certain that the Beatles had tapped into his spirit the truth, that everything was going to come down and the black man was going to rise. It wasn't that Charlie listened to the White Album and started following what he thought the Beatles were saying. It was the other way around. He thought that the Beatles were talking about what he had been expounding for years. Every single song on the White Album, he felt that they were singing about us. The song Helter Skelter, he was interpreting that to mean the blacks were going to go up and the whites were going to go down. Former Manson follower Catherine Sher, 2009, documentary Manson. That's a quote from her. Although Manson thought almost every song on the album had a meaning connected with the events he and in his view, the Beatles were foreseeing, he had to lay out the supposedly coded meanings for his followers. White Album songs, specifically known to have been connected with the vision, are I Will, Honey Pie, Don't Pass Me By, Your Blues, Sexy Sadie, Rocky Raccoon, Happiness is a Warm Gun, Blackbird, Helter Skelter, Piggies, Revolution 1, Revolution 9, Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey. Connected to the prophecy by family member Charles Tex Watson, not necessarily Manson. Beatles songs that are not on the White Album, but are also known to have a connection to Helter Skelter, are Blue Jay Way and Yellow Submarine. Also linked to the family is the song You Never Give Me Your Money, whose lyrics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all good children go to heaven, were found written on a door at Spawn Ranch. Okay. In the months before the murders were conceived, Manson and his followers began preparing for Helter Skelter, which they thought inevitable. In addition to working on songs for the hoped-for album, which would set off everything, they prepared vehicles and other items for their escape from the Los Angeles area, their home territory, to Death Valley when the days of violence would arrive. They pored over maps to plot a route that would bypass highways and get them to the desert safely. Indeed, Manson was convinced that the song Helter Skelter contained a coded statement of the route they should follow. Manson had said the war would start in the summer of 1969. In late June of that year, months after he'd been frustrated in his efforts to get the album made, he told a male family member that Helter Skelter was ready to happen. Blackie never did anything without Whitey showing him how, he said. It looks like we're going to have to show Blackie how to do it. On August 8th, 1969, the day Manson instructed his followers to carry out the first of 2 sets of notorious murders, he told the family, "Now is the time for Helter Skelter." When the murderers returned to Spawn Ranch, the family's Los Angeles area headquarters, after the crime, Manson asked Tex Watson, the sole man among them, whether it had been Helter Skelter. "Yeah, it was sure Helter Skelter," Watson replied. At the conclusion of the second set of murders, the following night, August 9 through 10, one of the killers wrote Helter Skelter on the refrigerator of the house in which the murders took place. That, along with other references to Beatles songs, was written in blood. References to the Beatles and the Book of Revelation. When the Beatles first came to the United States in February 1964, Charles Manson was an inmate in the United States Penitentiary at McNeil Island in southern Puget Sound. He was serving a sentence for attempting to cash a forged U.S. Treasury check. He was 29 years old. His fellow inmates found his interest in the British pop group almost an obsession. Taught by inmate Alvin Karpis to play the steel guitar, Manson told many persons that given the chance, he could be much bigger than the Beatles.